boss slowly stands and faces you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're hitting all the marks.
Yeah.
Okay, you get the bottom half of the walk towards you.
Yeah. Why, hello there. Today is day 682 since Elden Ring was first announced at E3 2019, and this is the Elden Wait, and I am joined today by a very prolific content creator who is still, even 5 years later, chugging out the Souls content. It is great stuff. I am joined today by Jake the Ashen Hollow. Hi, Jake. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, hey dude, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to as the first thing I wanted to say is I was watching some of your videos earlier today, and you are still really producing a lot of good lore stuff. And it's been 5 years since Dark Souls 3 came out. Is that it's just I I'm here doing my Elden Ring thing, trying to keep the vibes alive. But
Right.
how's it what sort of do you find like Dark Souls lore just as appealing as it was like 5 years ago? Is it what I'm just curious, as someone who's just producing so much good stuff still, like what's keeping you moving at this point?
Um, yeah, I would say it is just as appealing, but albeit in a different manner.
Mm,
Obviously, like for the most part, most things are uncovered. But
mm-hmm.
I feel like as I've kind of grown as a creator, I've kind of leaned really into this like cinematic feeling that I really enjoy with my videos. Where like initially I was kind of doing that standard like gameplay, and then I would post like a picture of the item descriptions, and I've slowly kind of evolved that into where a lot of my videos are now, where it's like purely cinematic
Yeah.
and trying to be more immersive, to not necessarily break every other sentence with, and this is what this item
Yeah.
description says. And I think that's really helped me kind of even clean up a lot of some of the older theories I've
Yeah.
had and make them like more concise and enjoyable to watch. Because it used to just be me ranting like a lunatic in a basement filled with smoke for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was watching your Arena and Aegon video earlier today, and that one definitely has that sort of that cinematic feel that I really enjoyed. And it does help you tell, like, as someone who's also into figuring out how to convey your theories and story and lore, it is nice with a cinematic approach, because you sort of you not only hit those narrative beats without interrupting it, but you also get like the emotional chords with
right,
with
right,
that approach much stronger. And it's nice, because I was watching, I was like, I'm gonna tune into this. I know Arena and in Egon. It's not a big deal. But by the end I was watching, I was like, damn, that was fun. I gotta go play Dark Souls 3 again. So,
right. Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
yeah
yeah, so
love that format.
yeah, so that's very nice. And I think the one thing for myself is always and I think it's a little bit of faith on the audience part, but there's that thing of someone's gonna be like, well, where did you get this theory from? Or pester you about like which item description. I feel like half the time when you show an item description, it's half because you're like, you want to just say where you got it from, and also so you don't
Right,
get the pestering comment being like, you just made that up.
right. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think everyone finds their niche there, and obviously you've found a system that works for you, and I was enjoying it today. It was really getting me into it.
yeah.
But
Appreciate it.
so with Elden Ring, how have you been following this closely, waiting, or are you just sort of biding your time, and when information comes out, it comes out? What's your sort of stance on Elden Ring at
Um,
this point?
Initially, I was like looking every day, like trying to deep Google any kind of
Hmm.
information. And after about day maybe 300, I kind of was just like, okay,
Yeah.
well, like they're not giving us like anything, right?
No.
Like the most recent thing we have is something that was leaked, isn't it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
just, yeah, I'll drive myself crazy
Yeah.
if I
Oh,
if I just keep
yeah.
yeah.
You certainly will drive yourself crazy. I'm living
Yeah.
testament to that. Luckily, YouTube was nice enough to demonetize my channel to still tell me to stop playing the same trailer over and over again. Um, but
Oh, did they really?
they did. But they
Jeez.
did because they were like, "Oh, you're reusing content in a non-transformative way," and I was like, first of all, that hurts my feelings, and second of all, okay, fine, I won't watch the trailer every day anymore. Your algorithm, whatever. But yeah, you will. It has been very wild. When did you get into the Souls games?
Um, Initially, like 2012,
Okay, so
kind of like about a year after Dark Souls 1 came out.
yeah, so you've been around it for a while, and like we remember that like amazing period of time where you had Dark Souls 2 come out, and then Dark Souls 2 again, and Bloodborne, and then Dark Souls 3. It was like 3 years of just like bangers
Right.
from
Yeah.
Software, and then we had what felt like a long break until we got like Sekiro and Deracine. But this has been, for obvious reasons, and I think some non-obvious reasons, just quite a different thing. And from Software fans, being around it for a while, it is not something we're used to. But
Right.
how do you feel in general about like this idea of From Software returning to like a fantasy, action RPG in the vein of Dark Souls, but from sort of from I guess both just yourself as a player and then sort of like from like a content perspective. Are you ready to hit the ground running with Elden Ring, or are you sort of more cautious in your approach as far as like absorbing the story and digging into that?
Um, I want to say that I would be a little bit cautious because I was a bit thrown with Sekiro because I kind of got this image in my head because of all the how a lot of the lore and things have worked with like Dark
Hmm.
Souls, and obviously Dark Souls is just an entire beast of its own that can't
Yeah.
really be compared. But like I didn't enjoy Sekiro that much, and I
Hmm.
thought the lore was I mean, it was like it was a good game, obviously. Like I'm not gonna say it was bad or anything, but it just I think I hyped it up too much to be something that it wasn't,
Hmm.
and I because that's kind of what I'd come to expect from how FromSoft was doing their games. But so I want to say that I'd be cautious, but I feel like it really seems like they're gonna go back to their roots, like in terms of like the narrative.
Hmm.
So, like I said, I plan to be cautious, but likely I'll hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's one of those things where it seems like you're probably in a similar vein where like, Bloodborne is maybe my favorite game of all time, and I enjoyed Sekiro, sort of like you're saying, but as a content creator, I personally for Sekiro didn't feel like I knew the subject matter nearly well enough to really
right,
confidently dive into a historically rooted game. But then you have Elden Ring coming out, and for to my mind, it's really the first like new big fantasy world since Dark Souls 1 because
hmm,
Dark Souls 2 and 3 are still in that universe, and so it's not that blank canvas, even though Dark Souls 2 is relatively separated and then Dark Souls 3 is essentially like sequel territory, but still plenty of like new stuff. But this is
right,
like the first time in like a decade that like as a From Software fan we're getting like a new fresh world where we don't have any
right,
history to contend with, and it's just this big thing to dive into. And I'm with you where like I don't feel like I'm going to be too cautious, but it is one of those things where there's so many unknowns at this point. And like I like George R. R. Martin, and I think his role in helping to build out the mythology that FromSoft is going to work with is going to be super cool. But
oh yeah,
it's one of those things where you still don't really know what to expect, and it's I'm curious to get your thoughts on like approaching this game, or like how you've approached like past like Souls games, like as someone who's both like a content creator and who comes at it from the story angle. Do you really, is your first like blind playthrough, is that really just trying to like get through the game, or do you take it very meticulously? Are you poking around every corner?
Um, I think typically, and I kind of did the same thing with like each of Dark Souls three's DLCs. I kind of want to just like get through it and kind of get like a broad overview
Yeah.
of like that story, so then I can like find where it's more appropriate to like really get deep into something or kind of like nitpick at a certain
Hmm.
topic or something. So yeah, I'd say meticulously on like specific things that I have in mind after I've got kind of, like the grand overarching story uh, contained.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, it is one of those things where it's interesting when something comes out, because yeah, I sort of do a similar thing where I try to wrap my mind around it, but I am it is interesting with this being an open world game that
Right.
it could just be very, very. I don't know how much different it will be in how you consume the lore, but they're talking about this having like the most weapons and most magic, and really going for this like breadth of options. And to me, partially that's like, oh, that's a lot of item descriptions and stuff. It's like
Right. Yeah.
there's a lot of potential there to have environmental storytelling on just a large scale, and get some of that stuff. So it is one of those things too where I think I also try and get through it, but then it's so hard for me to avoid those like little rabbit holes getting there, and then it's tough because then you sort of you also have people just wanting to get your general like opinions out there and thoughts, and you're like, I'm gonna say some stuff and it's gonna be so wrong at this point,
Right.
but
Oh yeah.
I think that's part of the fun for that. So how do you feel about the idea of Elden Ring being this like Dark Souls based game, but on a much larger scale? This like idea of this open world thing versus their more like linear. Essentially, I think it would be a little reductive to call it like a corridor design, especially like Dark Souls 3. But
Right.
they have generally given you pretty carefully crafted paths. And with Elden Ring, there's the potential there. First of all, you're riding on a horse, and
Right.
how does that, like, as a player, like how do you feel about this idea of like Dark Souls based combat set in like an open world, and assumingly with like new mechanics and things to sort of interact with this broader environment?
Oh yeah, dude. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah.
I like the idea of just like like if you think about like the Dark Souls lore and then just scale that out,
Yeah.
like
Mm.
really huge is I'm very excited for it. I'm very excited to like because like George R. R. Martin's writing like the mythos or whatever. I'm excited to see because he's already like a pretty like he writes things like kind of like ambiguous a little bit as well. So I'm really excited to see what Miyazaki does. He does his lore thing with what George R. R. Martin has written. I think is going to be
Yeah.
like really interesting to break down and kind of get into the details of just the mythos alone,
Hmm.
not withstanding like all the other lore.
Yeah.
So and then how that plays into like certain kingdoms who
Yeah.
worship whomever and stuff. So I think it's going to be really fun, and I think obviously, like, from a content perspective, like this just going to be at the beginning is going to seem limitless,
Yeah.
and especially because it's on a bigger scale than Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Uh, hopefully, anyway.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's
I'd have to imagine that it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I'm with you there. And because From Software, especially after pulling apart like the narratives and themes that they like dealing with, and the attention to detail that they use, the idea of having this outside stimulus, as Miyazaki has stated in an interview, like regarding George R. R. Martin's contribution, like the fact that George R. R. Martin is bringing in his own influences, as well as, I assume, like,
Mhm.
assume they came together over sort of common influences, whether that be like Dungeons and Dragons or common literature or whatever. But just that idea of getting a From Software game, but also having it sort of have someone else else's hands who's also very capable in there to just kind of mix it up from a narrative perspective. Because it's interesting. Miyazaki mentioned in an interview that they want to tackle like themes and ideas that they haven't in the
Mhm.
Dark Souls games. But then, at least for me, when I watch the trailer and even the leaked trailer, I hear stuff that sounds like very familiar. At the same time,
Right.
like when I saw the Elden Ring trailer, it was like, oh, this seems like Dark Souls as hell mixed with like some Lord of the Rings going on. And then the leaked trailer is like they're talking about crossing the sea of fog and you see giants and then there's someone harassing
Right.
you. And it's like so it's very exciting because it's going to be interesting to see that push and pull as as someone who looks at the narratives and themes from software uses very closely, but knowing that there's another hand at play and like teasing out, okay, what parts did, I assume it's very collaborative, but also, what parts did George R. R. Martin himself bring into this and how's this going to sort of warp and alter the From Software storytelling that we're used to?
Right. Yeah.
But
I think yeah, and I think that being said, like the George R. R. Martin Miyazaki collaboration has the potential to be one of like the greatest storytellings of a video game, but like on the same hand, it also has the potential to be the worst.
yeah.
So I think kind of yeah, it hangs in the balance. But
Yeah.
obviously, being a Dark Souls fanboy, I'm gonna
Yeah.
give Miyazaki the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy to think that like it really could go either way, honestly.
Yeah. And sort of like getting like way ahead of ourselves as far as Elden Ring is concerned. So how did you I know you do I've seen at least recently you've done a lot of Dark Souls 3 stuff. How did you feel about Dark Souls 2 and 3 as sequels to Dark Souls 1 in the trilogy sort of as a narrative whole? Do you think um were you happy with where Dark Souls 3 got to or do you just I guess the question is did you think that it felt like a well crafted narrative as like a trilogy or do you think each game sort of has their own bits and they don't stand as a whole as well or what's sort of your view on the trajectory of Dark Souls as a trilogy and as a continuing narrative?
Um, initially, and it's probably no secret. Initially, I was not a fan of Dark Souls 2 at all.
Mhm.
But funnily enough, after I did Project Dark Souls with all the people who contributed, it
Mhm.
kind of forced me into having to spend a lot of time with Dark Souls 2. Um, and I think that's where I kind of understood its value, but I still I mean, I'm still of the opinion that if you took Dark Souls 2 out, like 1 and 3 would still make perfect sense
Yeah.
without it,
Yeah, that is
like
yeah.
100%.
Yeah, Dark Souls
But
3 is like a direct sequel, whereas Dark Souls 2 is like a side story. It's not a very
yeah,
charitable way to put it, but
yeah, like it's almost like Rogue One, right?
yeah.
You didn't need the story. You knew like some of it happened and it was relevant, but they went from just the trilogy movies, and then Rogue One came, like 20 years later or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's like relevant, but like you didn't need it,
Yeah.
and the Star Wars trilogy still stands on its own without it. But I've learned, it's grown on me for sure, and I like I said, I understand its value and
Mhm.
enjoy the lore of it, but it's certainly not necessary
Yeah.
in the trilogy. But at the same on the same hand, it wouldn't be a trilogy with just two games, so
Yeah.
it's complicated to say the least.
Yeah, yeah, and I can't help but think of that like assuming which is where I'm saying I'm getting way ahead of myself. If Elden Ring was to be something where they're trying to turn it into a series like Dark Souls, um would my sort of thought on it is that I would almost hope that they would have not sequel hooks per se, but that they would craft the story to lend itself a little more because my personal like thing about Dark Souls is that like Dark Souls 1 could just exist by itself. And
Hmm.
there's no problem with it just stopping there narratively. And in fact, the themes of like cycles and continuation, they continue it in Dark Souls 3, but Dark Souls 1 already kind of spoke to the idea of cycles, and it sort of runs with
Right.
it a bit more. But um, I would sort of, if Elden Ring was to be designed to have the potential, I would sort of like it if there was any way to build a little bit of that into the game or the storyline up front versus not necessarily lend itself, or whatever strategy, just with that in mind. Versus, I don't know with Dark Souls 1 if if they necessarily planned for sequels. So how do you feel about that, as far as like, would you like a more continual narrative, like something where you don't have like that Dark Souls 2 sort of strange feeling, like it's like a side story, but more, maybe not a super linear narrative, but something that feels like it's building on itself
Right.
in a more intentional way?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the way to go
Yeah.
in terms of uh, making a story driven trilogy. And I think, like, obviously, like, there was a lot more at play with Dark Souls 2, right? Like, obviously Miyazaki didn't spend as much time on it
Yep.
as he probably would have liked, because he was working on Bloodborne. And
Yep.
I mean, obviously, thank God he was working on Bloodborne, because that was great.
Yep.
So yeah, it feels weird sometimes, because there's always that thought that maybe Dark Souls 2 was just, like, we need to put Dark Souls 2 out, so let's just do it, even though Boss Man's busy or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating to me, like, as over the course of like digging, like, while waiting for Elden Ring, I've been digging a lot more into From Software's sort of the as a studio and what they've been doing. And it was interesting but not surprising to me to discover that like there was a year overlap in development between Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3. Um where, Dark Souls 3 had already started a year before Dark Souls 2 even came out. So
Oh.
it's just interesting, like it makes a lot more sense, because when you hear like that, you're like, "Oh, well, that totally explains why like they weren't even done with the story necessarily for Dark Souls 2. It was going through all these upheavals and development
Right.
issues." And so Dark Souls 3 was like, well, we're just gonna do this thing. And even with Dark Souls 3, um, it doesn't seem like it seems like they had narrative, like, or they had like themes and concepts, but the narrative, it's fascinating to hear like, oh, like Sullivan used to be like the big bad, or like they just like swapped
Right.
people around, and it seems like there were some big changes. So when looking at that perspective, it's not surprising that like you have the case of like like a lot of people, I think, sort of felt this way, and I think it's echoed by the development timeline, is that it almost feels like Dark Souls 2 and 3 are two different versions of how you would do a Dark Souls 1 sequel. and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and
absolutely.
that's why they don't feel like Dark Souls 2 really builds into Dark Souls 3, which I think works for good and bad. Like, I was always sort of disappointed myself that Aldia didn't get more time, but how would Aldia even show up in Dark Souls 3, considering he like development for Dark Souls 3 was well underway by the time
Right.
Scholar of the First Sin came out to flesh out that character. So
Yeah.
it's not something that could happen. But that's sort of where I come from, in the sense that like I don't think there's really a problem with Dark Souls. Like, there's, you know I love the trilogy and it's great, but I could imagine thinking about that a little more. But also, I think it's sort of known at this point that Miyazaki, it seems his personal preference is more new ideas versus going
Hmm.
over the same thing, which is why he seems to bounce around. But
Yeah.
I just find that interesting, how that happened, and maybe how they can take that moving into the future. And it may not turn out that way, but it just seems like when you have Bamco involved, and I assume they're going to want some more Souls type stuff, that there would be a
Hmm.
sort of push to sort of build off of that. And why not make three games that you could say are inspired by George R. R. Martin instead of just one? But
Right.
um, so I'm curious to get your stance on Do you think Dark Souls 3 is like a fitting sort of end to the series, or would you ever be interested in seeing like a Dark Souls 4 pop out?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to ask. Given the idea that Dark Souls 3 could have easily been Dark Souls 2, and
Yeah.
then we could have had a new Dark Souls 3 for the trilogy because Dark Souls 3 brought up like so many like new things that really didn't get built upon enough. I think, like you said, Pontiff Sullivan being one of them. Then, like the Age of the Deep, like that came out of nowhere, and we learned about it for like half a second, and that
Yeah.
was it. Like it brought in like so many new concepts to this Dark Souls universe that we didn't like. In Dark Souls 1, it was like, okay, it's either fire or dark. Now it's like it's either fire or dark or Age of Deep, or you can just take the flame and it's like Hollowed Land, or like it introduced so many new concepts and only expanded probably really on the idea of uh, an Age of Man or an Age of Hollows.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, yeah, it brought in so many more things than Dark, and it kind of did what I think Dark Souls 2 wanted to do, which was expand on new ideas. But I think Dark Souls 2 just took it like in a much further away direction.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, obviously, it did introduce the concept of like on this same tract of land, like kingdoms have risen and fallen as the cycles go on, and that's cool, obviously. But like most of that story could have been like DLCs to 3, which could have been 2, and then we could have had a third
Yeah.
Dark Souls game. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely interesting to think about, and you know, I do wonder if Elden Ring coming is sort of like, especially from Bamco, is saying like, okay, this is like the Dark Souls now. To put it in a, like I'm sure From Software would not want
Right,
that to be the
right.
wording. I think there's things that they want to tackle, but you do get that sense from Dark Souls 3, like there's themes and ideas that they were like, oh, let's try this, but they didn't get to do it. And I don't know if that'll make it into Elden Ring, but it is interesting that you know, because with the marketing for Dark Souls 3, it was like, this is the end of the trilogy. And then as it got closer to release, they're like, this is a turning point in the series. and that sort of marketing probably, I can't help but
Mhm.
just do my little like speculative like detective sleuthing, being like, did Bamco ask that they not make it so definitive that they leave like sort of a back door? Did that play into the narrative? Um, but because they do introduce like stuff like the deep is so interesting, and seemingly with Elden Ring, with Bamco, we may not get any sort of continuation of that. But like for me, like everything with Aldrich is just super fascinating, and
Right,
it's
yeah.
to the point where you like, at least when I played through Dark Souls 3, you're like, you have the undead settlement and then the Church of the Deep, and like everything is building toward Aldrich and Pontiff Sullivan and this whole dynamic that they have going. And then you get back to Lothric and you're like, oh yeah, Lothric. Yeah.
Yeah, Age of Fire.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny when I was watching your Rosaria video, which is really good. And it was interesting because you're talking about like the royal family, and I was like, man, Dark Souls 3 really just has piles and piles of like, not redundancy, but like there's just so much there that nothing seems to necessarily get the
Mhm.
spotlight as much. Because you were bringing up how like the dancer and like the royal family, and I was like, yeah, it's like I had such confusion when I was going through, being like, which royal family? Are we talking about Lothric, or are we talking about
Right.
the gods? Like, which is like, are they the royal family? Like, how do you even describe these things? Because from Dark Souls 1, it feels like it might be the gods, but then Lothric is obviously the actual focal point, but you go away from it for so long that it almost kind of
Mhm.
like feels so. It is nice, and stuff like your video does a good job of like showing like they made efforts to tie it together and to have them linked in that Dark Souls way that's very satisfying, where it's like, oh, there's actually connections if you look,
Right, right.
and you can make some good suppositions about how they might be like, the gods might be infused into that family with, people like Guinevere and stuff. So but it is interesting, and it is, while all of that is interesting, is very exciting to me to imagine that from what we've heard from like Omnipotent and other like whispers is like Elden Ring bringing in this whole new pantheon of gods and their drama and their bullshit. And I am, it's like on the one hand, it's nice to see that Dark Souls is still going strong and that I can watch a lore video and still be like, yeah, there's things and perspectives I haven't considered. And on the other hand, I'm like, I'm so excited to see everyone dive into this new blank canvas and just get to tear it apart without having this like labored history, sort of
Right.
behind it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Blank slate.
yeah, so it's exciting. It's exciting there, and but so strange that we haven't got we're what is it? It's April 20th now as of recording, and it's been almost, I think June 9th will mark 2 years since the trailer came out.
Jeez.
And I know that there's like the pandemic in place, but also
Right.
it's like I you like you said around day 300 you just sort of gave up on there, but and that's the smart way to go. But it's also a case of like it's very strange to me, and I'm not to the point of worrying, but like it's just they have like from like the bits of communication we have gotten have been from like Katao on his personal Twitter account.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just so funny that like Elden Ring, like tweet you coward, like just like
And
just
I think that's the biggest problem, right? Is
yeah,
visibility. Like
yeah,
nobody's gonna be upset. Like, hey, we had a pandemic that
yeah.
affected everybody. Like, obviously, like we want you to take your time with your game. Like fans always do, but to just be like radio silent for like years
Yeah,
is I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, and it's funny.
Strange.
I got an email from someone the other day, and they let me know that at GameStop they had gotten Elden Ring promotional materials, and they showed me a picture, and the picture was literally the Elden Ring like text logo on its black background, and then at the bottom corner is a Bandai Namco logo and its little like tiny trademark text and stuff, and and then at the top it said coming soon, and that slayed me. I was like, is this literally like? And they gave me a little background that says this is the second time they've gotten promotional material for Elden Ring. The first time was around TGA 2019, which fits in line with the idea that Elden Ring was supposed to target 2020, and even before the pandemic, it had sort of extended its development time, probably because they're tackling a much larger scope and they just didn't
Mhm.
fully realize how much time it would take them. But hearing that was like exciting for a minute. But then when I saw coming soon, I was like, this is not, I don't want to see this ever. like,
Right. Yeah.
it's just so funny. Like, you could have sent this, like, I was very tempted to ask them, like, did you do you know if this is the same promotional material they sent in 2019? Because it's literally like there's nothing, and everything we get is still like this is really old. Like the leaked trailer, for instance, is probably
Right.
really old. Like it's 1 year plus old of footage, so it's like it's coming from a much different time, and it's just it is wild, and it every bit we get. Do you have any you've sort of been on the back burner for it, but do you have any speculation for when you think Elden Ring will come out? I like to put this out because it's
Ugh.
fun to be wrong for me. I'll throw out my stuff and like I always give the caveat I don't know shit. But if you had to guess a time, what's your
Um.
what's your bet?
I don't know that I necessarily have a prediction for when it will come out, but I do think that it won't be 2021.
Yeah. Yeah, I was on Team April for a while, but as of April 15th, I decided, I think I was holding on to Team April because if a game was going to come out in 2021, I think that some people are like, oh, maybe they'll just like not shadow drop Elden Ring, but they'll give it a quick turnaround. Like they'll do like a Breath of the Wild thing where they say it's out in 2 months, or like a Bethesda thing. But
Right.
I don't think they'll do that personally, because they got George R. R. Martin. They're gonna want to push that so that they hit a mainstream
Oh yeah.
audience. And
Oh, definitely.
despite us following stuff, your average person has long forgotten about Elden Ring, and it's gonna take time for that to penetrate like non-gamer circles to try and pull in that wider audience, that Game of Thrones people who played Skyrim last and they want to play another fantasy game. Like that's the audience you might be trying to tackle. So that'll take
Right.
time. So I've fallen off of 2021 as well, because I just think you're going to get at least 8 months. And so that means if we didn't get something at the beginning of April, there's really no hope. And at
Mhm.
this point, I'm thinking maybe some sort of reveal, E3, who knows, probably attached to Microsoft in some sense. And then my new, I'm not hashtag Team April, I'm hashtag Elden Spring 2022 now. you know,
Nice.
just because I think that just goes in line with when they've released previous games. And even though
Right.
it is starting to get into the current generation a bit far for a essentially last generation game or a cross generation game, nobody's coming out with games this year. Like there's games
Right.
coming out, but they've been heavily delayed, so I don't think it will stand out in the market as a cross generation game in spring of next year. But you know it'll be interesting to see how it pops up once there is information out. Do you tend to follow along with it, or do you go dark after like a gameplay trailer?
Uh, no, I've never really like avoided
Yeah.
spoilers or anything like that because I honestly like you just give me as much lore as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I think it is time to watch the leaked trailer.
yeah, yeah, let's do it.
And have you watched the leaked trailer before?
I actually have not.
Okay, so this will be a treat. It's 720p glory, and
Nice.
taken from seemingly like a Nokia from 2005. So
Perfect. Old school leak.
yeah, exactly.
I like it.
All right, so here I'll bring that up.
People just like hack places to leak things now. This guy went in and like filmed it covertly. Respect.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, dragons and giants. Check.
Yep.
Oh, you tragic thing. You've crossed the sea of fog all the way to the Riftlands. Well, this is the very edge of the map. Imagine what drives you to seek the Elden Ring. I suppose you can't be talked into turning back. Very well, then.
It's got a skeleton from like Kingsfield.
Right. The dialogue was very Dark Souls.
Yeah.
That was literally homing soul mass.
Yep. And then I think you have the Farron
Yeah.
something right there. It's so jarring how it goes to this B-roll footage.
Right. They open the doors the same way as well.
Yeah, you gotta have that door open.
Classic. Boss slowly stands and faces you.
Right.
Yeah. We're hitting all the marks.
Yeah.
Okay, you get the bottom half of the walk towards you.
Yeah.
There's the point. Oh, in the moon. Okay.
Yeah. So there you go. It's your first time watching the glorious leaked trailer. So
I liked it though. I mean, obviously there were definitely elements that were incredibly Dark Souls.
mhm.
But to be honest, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the interesting things is especially at the end there, you do have this very like Onmyoji looking person, and that's a little bit different from, you know, in the Souls games you've typically had this like Eastern person, and
Hmm.
but that was very Eastern, and I'm curious in an open world game if we might get like a whole like Eastern area or something, like,
Yeah,
you might
right.
get some of that, like, just because it's an open world, maybe it's an opportunity to take that. But also I'm curious, like, I know you just watched it, so it's hard to take it in, but like when I hear the Riftlands, I can't help but conjure an image of like Lothric and like the Convergence, and I just
Right.
get
Yeah.
running with this idea of like, because am I really like the idea of Lothric and the idea like that it's pulling these lands together to try and make it happen. And
Right.
but it's something where I think the idea is maybe cooler than the execution in some ways, because it doesn't get too crazy. There's cool touches, but so like if they're playing with that again, and there's this idea that like maybe the Elden Ring is shattered and it's pulling these like kingdoms in this nonsensical way, like who maybe have pieces or parts of the Elden Ring, and it's like pulling it toward it in a similar like convergence, which I would be a little surprised just because it's so on the nose like Dark Souls 3. But I also, it's something where I wouldn't mind seeing the concept again, because I really enjoyed that. But I always wanted to see even more crazy convergence stuff. I think you have everything with like Anor Londo in Dark Souls 3 and pulling you towards there, and you get sort of the archaeology of like Farron used to be, Ulasil and all that stuff. But just the idea there of playing with like your character moving through this like nonsensical space.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I also, yeah, that I kind of get like Norse mythology vibes for sure from that big tree that was in the trailer several times.
exactly. Yeah,
Of like Yggdrasil, however you pronounce it,
yeah,
the world tree or whatever.
yeah. Just so, and it's interesting there because that tree looks kind of transparent. You can see through it in some of the shots, and
Oh, nice.
in the Dark Souls 3 DLC with the Millwood Knights, their symbol is the ethereal oak. So it does get you
Right. Yeah.
wondering a little bit if like, okay, was this like an early nod to whatever they were thinking of with Elden Ring? Maybe, maybe not. Like, there, but it is interesting to look at the Millwood Knights in that way, especially in context of for the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. In an interview, Miyazaki talked about how they were playing with like the wolves and their AI, and he used the term open field to describe how they were try to like new AI and smarter AI in this more like open field setting. And then you have
Oh, nice.
Elden Ring pop up. So it's curious to see how much of the Dark Souls 3 DLC may have not been like a testing ground, because I don't think that would have been satisfactory, but how much those ideas may have started to be in the
Right.
studio consciousness, like how much they're like, okay, so our next game is going to be this, and so we're going to start playing with these ideas. Or maybe even if they're working on the DLC and they're like, we got to try this, but we would really love to like run with this idea and give it like legitimate like scale to support some of the things we're thinking about.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah, I'm with you there, where it does the Leech trailer does feel very Dark Souls, and I think in some ways very like Dark Souls 2, because the color palette is a little brighter. And
Hmm.
that's been something that's been a comment on that video of mine, because that was my upload of the leaked trailer, and I have for the last couple months almost gotten no shortage of Dark Souls 4 comments. And it is, I can see where people are coming from, and I do feel like there's a lot of Dark Souls stuff there, and I think the difference comes down to a lot is the context. Like you see that dragon floating down, and we fought dragons before. Seeing a dragon is basically checking a box, especially when you're dealing with From Software and George R. R. Martin. But there's also the idea
Right.
like, what if that dragon is just like out in the world, or like what if that's a first encounter and then that thing is pursuing you at points, like like something
Right.
like Skyrim where you'll run into a dragon, and it's sort of an organic event. It's so interesting to see how that will work, and then how that will play into their storytelling, because if you're having these moving elements in the world and these more organic things, I'll be so curious, because From Software is seemingly, by going open world, giving up a little bit of control, in the sense that like when you came across stuff, it was always in the sort of the order and sequence essentially that they wanted you to approach it in. But now, I don't know if you saw in there, but it looks like someone is sneaking also. So it seems like they might be bringing in, and rumors from Omnipotent have said they might be bringing in essentially the Sekiro light stealth system. And that's really interesting to see how that'll work as an RPG, where like, can you
Right.
build out a character to be like a thief or like a rogue? And if you can really lean into that, how that'll work. Obviously, the horse combat changes things up pretty significantly. Even though, interestingly, in that leaked trailer, we see the horse combat for a total of like 6 seconds.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, that is the leaked trailer though, and hopefully we will get, since when a full trailer comes out, I'm gonna be all over, framing
Right. Yeah.
through it, a bunch of other embarrassing things, like watching it at like quarter speed, because that's how I am, and you watch at quarter speed and then you have to hear everyone's dialogue sound like they're drunk, and you're
Right.
just trying to catch something in the background. But we will see when that happens. But Jake, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been real fun. Just picking someone's brain who's still very actively pulling apart Dark Souls lore, and just hearing your thoughts on Elden Ring moving into another potential big chunk of our lives. That'll
Yeah. Absolutely, dude. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, countless hours, and working on theories, depending, like
Yeah.
it is hard not to look at Elden Ring and wonder, like, oh, is this going to be the next 10 years of my life? Like, what's going to happen? Because sort of
Right.
at the mercy of From Software a little bit, because if it's good, I can't stay away. But
Exactly.
yeah, so yeah, thank you. I'm sure everyone listening has heard of the Ashen Hollow, but if not, I will have everything linked below. But where would you like people to find you on the internet? Where's good places to hear your thoughts and see your content?
Basically just YouTube and Twitter,
Okay,
both the Ashen Hollow.
perfect. Yeah, and once again, thank you so much for coming on, and for everyone else, I'll see you again for the next Elden Wait.